This week on Act Out, the psychopathic framing of the Democratic debates are a kind of microcosm in which to view how out of touch the U.S. is with reality. For instance, the threat of nuclear genocide is considered a policy talking point, rather than an existential emergency. Finally, Ann Whitehat joins us to talk about her personal experience with the anti-protest bills that have popped up across the country. From tweets to marching in the streets, this is Act Out.
Blockade! Bulldozers swarm outside the checkpoint gate. A noise flash broke the hush and blew me into the street. I awoke next to the body of my baby. No!
Welcome to Act Out. I'm Eleanor Goldfield, and this is your tipping point. So I know that despite my most sincere efforts, I can't avoid talking about the 2020 presidential elections entirely. That being said, I'm not going to analyze debates, tit-for-tat, he-saids and she-saids, or spend a lot of time digging for the few positive kernels of hope in the heap that is the Democratic list of hopefuls, most of whom, I might add, won't be in the race in a few months anyway. Now, it's not that I don't have any hope, it's that my hope doesn't rest at the feet of any of these candidates, or indeed any one person. In this country, we place entirely too much importance on the federal presidential elections. More dangerously, though, is our historical amnesia with regards to the lesser evil argument, and the perpetuation of status quo oppression and destruction under both Democrats and Republicans. Power concedes nothing, and as we continue to walk boldly into absolute climate chaos, the fact that climate change is still a point of debate and wishy-washy political banter should tell you everything you need to know about our electoral politics. The fact that you have CNN asking questions about nuclear war, saying that it ties our hands if we don't threaten to strike first, should tell you all you need to know about the corporate media framing 2020. Indeed, I bet diet fascist Jake Tapper was practically shaking with excitement when the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, or INF, was finally murdered this past Friday at the ripe old age of 32. This treaty, unlike others before it agreed upon during the Cold War, led to the destruction of 2,700 missiles and banned either side from deploying new ones of that type. In short, it mitigated the threat of nuclear war. But this would not stand for the warhawks to come. Since back in 2002, when Bush withdrew from the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty, the back and forth between Russia and US presidents has only escalated, a sort of nuclear sandbox tiff. In 2014, for instance, under Obama's administration, both sides claimed that the other side was violating the terms of the treaty. Fast forward to 2019, and in February, Trump and Pompeo announced the suspension of the INF, only to once again kill it last week. And with would-be kings of a global graveyard, Pompeo and Bolton, surrounding Trump, it's really not at all surprising that the US is already planning to test new missiles previously banned by the INF. An unnamed U.S. official told CNN that Washington aims to deploy the weapon in areas of Europe where it could overpower Russian air defense systems and strike the country's ports, military bases, or critical infrastructure. Fellow Russophobes, NATO, were quick to fall in line behind Uncle Sam, saying that the U.S. really had no choice but to pull out of the treaty because it wasn't effective. Meanwhile, on Friday, Russia's Deputy Foreign Minister, Sergei Ryabkov, said in a statement, "We invited the U.S. and other NATO countries to assess the possibility of declaring the same moratorium on deploying intermediate-range and shorter-range equipment as we have. The same moratorium," Vladimir Putin declared, saying that Russia will refrain from deploying these systems when we acquire them unless the American equipment is deployed in certain regions. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg spit back, saying that such a statement is not credible. And meanwhile, according to a recently released and then quickly deleted document published by a NATO-affiliated body, there are some 150 U.S. nuclear weapons being stored in Belgium, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, and Turkey. Furthermore, between June 8th and 22nd of this year, military forces of 18 nations took part in the Baltops naval maneuvers, which involved maritime, air, and ground forces with about 50 ships and submarines and 40 aircraft in and around the Baltic. Then on July 16th, rapid forge strike aircraft had been sent to Poland, Lithuania, and Estonia in a test of these services' ability to quickly deploy air power overseas. These aircraft were specifically deployed to operate as closely as possible to Russian airspace. So, it seems to me that NATO is in no fucking place to tell Russia it's not being sincere about nuclear treaties when NATO, essentially the bitch of the US war machine, is doing everything short of directly attacking Russia in order to start another world war. But, as the saying goes, Russia must want war. Just look at how close they put their country to our military bases. At the same time, Russia is cutting back on its military spending, just as our government approved a $1.48 trillion Pentagon budget. And looking ahead to that nuclear horizon, Bolton and Trump have already said that they would not seek to renew START, the Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty Agreement, which, if not renewed, will expire in 2021. The pact caps the number of deployed strategic nuclear warheads by both Russia and the US to 1,550 and places similar limits on the two countries' number of intercontinental ballistic missiles. In other words, this would mean that there would be zero treaties holding us back from all-out nuclear war. And if you'll recall, in mid-June, the Pentagon publicly posted a document saying that, quote, nuclear weapons could create conditions for decisive results and the restoration of strategic stability. Specifically, the use of nuclear weapons will fundamentally change the scope of a battle and develop situations that call for commanders to win. No shit, it changes the scope of battle, because it causes instant genocide, you sick fucks. Now, imagine for a second that the tables were turned, that Russia had bases all over Canada and Mexico, had pulled out of one treaty, were threatening to pull out of another, were testing missiles all over the damn place, and had publicly stated via both media talking heads and official documentation that nuclear war is a good call. Would we be standing there with a fucking olive branch? No, we'd already be living through a nuclear winter. You know, like the 10 people in the world who actually would survive. So truly, the fact that Russia is offering any kind of olive branch is something we should jump on, accept, negotiate with, and build immediately. And this is not to say that Russia's blameless. This is to say that the blame game does not fucking matter when we're talking about mutually assured destruction on a global level. Ultimately, the list of who to blame is as long as the itemized list of our military expenditures. The only thing that matters right now is that we are continuously poking the bear that is the nuclear power of Russia. We are actively antagonizing a global power when the doomsday clock is the closest it's ever been to midnight, and that's on us. The terrifying severity of this situation cannot be understated, and we as Americans have an obligation to ourselves and literally every other living thing on this fucking planet to stand resolutely and loudly against this aggression. And that includes calling out diet fascists like Jake Tapper who normalize nuclear war threats. That includes being realistic about how entrenched the war machine is in the political careers of almost every damn candidate. It means recognizing how undemocratic our supposed democracy is and assessing our own faith in an electoral system that only pedestals the rich and powerful. It means looking to ourselves to build peace in the face of war. Moving on to the pipeline front lines, you'll recall that we've covered anti-protest bills on this show before, and yet talking about legislation is always a lot different than living it. Down in Louisiana, water protectors from the L'Oiseau pipeline resistance camp have found themselves in the crosshairs of these Orwellian laws and are fighting back. Here to talk more about it is Ann Whitehat, Sichangu Lakota and member of the Advisory Council for the L'Oiseau pipeline resistance camp. Take a look.
So, L'Oiseau, the camp which was started to stop the Bayou Bridge pipeline, has filed a lawsuit against the Louisiana anti-protest bill. To start off here, talk about that law that Louisiana has on the books.
Well, the law, as you know, was couched and presented to the Louisiana legislature by a group called ALEC, which is the American Legislative Exchange Council. And so they've been working, they're in cahoots with the oil industry pretty deep. And so they've taken this law, they put together a template of this law and basically sending it and taking it and to all the states that have pipeline projects. And so last year we spent some time in Baton Rouge at the legislature. I was actually on the ground at least one day up there delivering letters and trying to talk with folks. So I was there in the chambers when they passed the law, which was just really heartbreaking. And I thought, well, we're in for it now. Here we go. You know, they're coming after us.
Yeah, and many people, including you, have come under fire from this specific bill. Can you talk about what happened in your case?
Well, there's a lot of contention about right now just around our arrest itself. So for me personally, I was arrested at on the boat launch. We were going out to go do some monitoring and take some visitors to camp out into the swamp. Was something that we like to do, is take folks out and let them see what we're here to protect. So we were getting ready to do that. And before we start anything, we have a prayer. We do a prayer for safety and protection and those sorts of things. So we did our prayer. And I was, previous to that, one of the media people was there. A journalist was there, and they had arrested her first, pretty much drug her from the boat launch. She was actually about to get into the boat. At that point, I ran up to the levee, to the top of the levee, because that's pretty much the only place you can get cell phone service out there in the swamp. It's really hard to get cell phone service. So I ran up there and I made some phone calls to find out if she actually did have a warrant for her arrest. And at that point, there were no warrants for her arrest. But they sure took her away. And then as we're getting ready to, depart still and trying to make arrangements who's going to go check on her, we're loading up our boats, did our prayer ceremony, and they had actually pointed me out at one point. They like literally just pointed me, identified me, and I thought, well, they're coming after me next. I'm not sure what this is all about, but they sure did. I was like in the middle of the group as we were walking down to the boat ramp, and about 4 of those police officers came and right into the middle of the group straight at me. And I sort of de-arrested myself several times in the scuffle. It was like a huge scuffle to trying to get me. And at one point, one of the officers shouted about tasing folks. And so folks sort of started stepping back, and that's when they nabbed me, But again, they didn't have an arrest warrant for me. I kept asking, where's the warrant? Where's the warrant? And at one point, the police officer said, we'll have the warrant when you get to the jail. The warrant will be there, which, I was like, that's not right. So on the way to the jail, I was in the back of the police cruiser, the truck, going down through the bayou, and he stopped the car. And I thought, oh, shit, is this the point where is this the place where I disappear now? You know what I mean? Because you never know. People disappear all the time. So it was really kind of terrifying at that point. He got out and he walked to the back, and I didn't know what was going on. And at that point, they moved me to another vehicle with a couple of women officers that were in that truck. And then they continued to drive me to the jail. And so there's a lot of questions about what that transfer was about, and whether or not those police officers were actually moonlighting as energy or as Bayou Bridge pipeline security, because they are moonlighting as security for the pipeline at this point. They have been doing that. So there's a lot of questions that we have about those particular arrests.
Well, this is also really messed up because this was not even, you guys weren't even like at a lockdown or a protest or anything like that. You were just getting onto a boat and they came and attacked you.
We were getting onto the boat, getting ready to get onto the boat. And so what they're saying is that our arrests were for a previous date when we were out on private property where we were allowed to be. We were invited to be on the property and asked to come there and help protect their property. And at that point, the pipeline was coming through their property, and they didn't have permission to be there. There was no agreement with the landowners. So we went out and we stopped them from construction. And so the deal there was that the pipeline company Bayou Bridge did not have any authority to be on that land. So what they're saying is at that point in this arrest that I was trespassing on critical infrastructure, which is the easement. And so supposedly trespassing. Now, mind you, there was no easement at the time. We were not trespassing because there was no easement. And I think that I feel like I was targeted because I wasn't masked up, you know. A lot of folks were wearing masks. And I chose not to that day because I knew that I wasn't doing anything wrong. I was invited to be there. There was nothing unlawful about what I was doing at all. So I was not afraid to show my face because I'm not doing anything wrong. So of course they identified me, and I'm some kind of wondering if they're going to be trying to find others as well who didn't wear a mask that day. Might be facing arrest at some point.
And what is the the charge with these charges, the trespassing critical infrastructure? What does that entail? Like, what are because around the country people face hundreds of thousands of dollars, time in prison. Like, what does this entail in Louisiana?
In Louisiana, each count faces up to 5 years in prison. There's a monetary fine as well that can also go along with this. And I'm facing myself up there. I have 2 counts, so like up to 10 years in prison for being lawfully on a piece of property that the landowners said that we were allowed to be there. And doing what we need to do to stop these construction projects because they're so horrific. We all know the catastrophes that come from these pipeline projects and the destruction that happens. And so this is something that we were planning to do. Not that we were planning. This is something that we had. That is just a part of our work. Integral to our work is stopping these pipeline projects in many forms. Direct action is what we're really is something that we embrace.
And what's the status on your case? Have you gone to court already? Have there been any hearings?
We haven't gone to court. They apparently have like 4 years. There's like a 4-year timeline where they have to formally charge us or not. So kind of on the limb for 4 years here.
What are the grounds that you're using for this lawsuit, saying that it's unconstitutional, or how is it being framed?
Well, the framework is that it is unconstitutional and that it is vague. It is very vague in how it can be enforced. So it's a tool that they can totally use to just target anybody they want to, because in South Louisiana and Louisiana in general, if you look at the map, there are like 125,000 miles of pipeline or something insane. And so you can literally, like a normal person, any citizen is probably standing on an easement or close to a pipeline easement anywhere you go in that state. So it's sort of up to we think that it can be used to target certain people and that they're using it to target us in particular, just because of the way it's written and it's so vague.
And as you noticed with Alec, these are the same bills that popped up in North Dakota and, across the country. There are more of these bills popping up all over the place. Do you know of other lawsuits like yours that are happening anywhere else?
I understand here in South Dakota, I'm here in South Dakota right now. I'm from South Dakota, so I'm here for ceremonial commitments right now for the month. But I understand that folks here in South Dakota who are also pipeline protesters, I guess you could say. And well, in South Dakota, they're calling us riot boosters, okay? That's sort of the language that they're using for this. But I understand that folks have filed a lawsuit here in South Dakota with the ACLU and some other groups that are sort of movement leaders in this effort to stop the pipeline constructions.
And of course, this proves another side, like the other side of this conversation. It proves that what you're doing is effective, right? Because they wouldn't pass these bills if you weren't really starting to scare them and threaten their stranglehold.
Exactly. And that's exactly what I have been telling folks is that we have been really effective. If you're looking at any of this work down in South Louisiana, what we have done down there has been groundbreaking on so many levels in terms of just organizing work and just the direct action and being out there and doing the work, like not afraid to stop this thing. And we're not afraid of that company. We're not afraid of those folks. We know what they're up to. We know how they operate. And we're not afraid to confront them on that level. And so, yes, they're going to come towards us with whatever they can grab, whatever tools they have at at their fingertips. And so this is one of the ways that they're doing this. And it's very dangerous because this is also going to be coming to pretty much all of the states. People are waking up. People are waking up across the country, and people are seeing stuff like what we're doing, other movements that are doing. And when people see people being brave, they start to stand up. And that is the fear. That is the fear that we're being brave, and other folks are seeing that and starting to rise as well. And so this is one of the ways to push that and scare anybody to not step up. Because it is frightening to be facing 10 years in prison.
Yeah, of course. And that's what they're hoping.
That is what they're hoping, and that is what they're thinking is going to stop us. But we're going to keep going. We got the front lines are now up in the court system right now, so we're still on it. Yeah. And hopefully that we'll be able to, that this will also be an effective organizing effort. We have a great team of attorneys with the Center for Constitutional Rights. So those folks are on it. So I have a lot of confidence.
Good. And as you mentioned, I mean, this is just one of many tools. I mean, there have been, outright threats against folks involved with the camp, and there have been a lot of. This should be illegal too, but there have been a lot of illegal and very shady and dark tools that they've used against Low LV as well.
Oh yes, the oppression on us and the violence that has been aimed at our camp, and particularly the Indigenous women, the violence that folks have endured is unacceptable, and like that is the crime, and we're unable to even pursue those as for formal charges, which is it's hard. Those are hard pills to swallow. Those are really hard things to have to accept. We were out on a boat last fall. We were taking crews out to do monitoring, and one of the ETP or one of the Bayou Bridge Pipeline Security created a huge wake out in the bayou and sunk 2 of our boats. And that is a fact. That happened. We know who did it. He knows that everybody is talking about this in the bayou, and everybody knows because that guy was out there bragging about it, and there was nothing that we can really do to pursue that to get any kind of justice at this point, because we're afraid that it's going to come back on us and bite us in the butt. And so it's terrible to be on this fence line of sorts, because we don't have justice for even people coming over. And one of our founders was physically attacked outside of her home and beaten, and so we still can't even get justice for any of these things, but we're still standing strong because we know that we're doing the right thing.
And so finally wrapping up here, what is this? What is the status with Low LV? What's going on down there?
Right now, status of Louis La Vie is that we are not a frontline camp right now, because the campaign itself they pretty much finished. They're saying that they finished, but there is no oil running through that yet. And so we're not taking any of this as a defeat, right? So we've done some very successful things. One is raising and elevating the issues of these pipeline construction projects in the Atchafalaya Basin. And so folks know and raise that issue around the globe. And so we're successful in that. We're also successful in helping the community of St. James, which is down in Cancer Alley, and they are the terminus for the Bayou Bridge Pipeline and all kinds of other chemical processing projects. They are literally right there in their community. They only have one road out because one of the companies came and bought up this property and pretty much blocked the exit out, the second exit they have out of their community. So we started voicing concern about getting them a second way out. So we were effective in helping that process move along with the state. They're starting to look at alternatives and start to put something together for them. We were also effective in stopping the Bayou Bridge pipeline from actually coming through our camp. So they actually went around us because it's cheaper for them to just reroute this thing than to fight us. And so that is a huge victory. And I'm hoping that people out there will see this, that if you make a concerted effort and you stand up to protect your land and your property, it is effective. We were effective in doing that, and they went around us. This company went around our camp. They did not even want to try. So we were effective in protecting our own land, which is significant because I think they intimidate a lot of landowners along these property, along these pipeline routes. And I'm going to tell you, landowners, do not be afraid. Do not be afraid to say no. Do not be afraid to organize folks to come out to your land and stop these construction projects. It's your property. They have no right to use eminent domain to come and take anybody's land. And that don't be afraid to stop them. And also, don't be afraid of the consequences, because there's a lot of people like us who have been through this, and a lot of folks out here that have been through things up at Standing Rock who have your back and who have experience and are ready to come and lend support. So that's something that, what we're talking about as well. So at Louis La Vie right now, we're not a pipeline resistance camp in that effort. It's not like a housed camp there anymore. So we're sort of transitioned into this larger movement where we're working on and supporting the fight against these pipeline infrastructure laws. And supporting that, and then also the land itself. Now we're transitioning into actually trying to develop a model of a just transition. So what does it look like to actually save your property, do that food sovereignty work, feed the people, put in some renewable energy projects, and really show people what it's actually going to take and what it can look like.
And that will do it for this week's Dose of Dissent. Thank you so much for watching. A reminder, the best way to stay up to date on our work is to sign up for the newsletter at the address below. To those who have donated, thank you so much. Please keep spreading the word in order to ensure our ability to keep acting out. From the Devil's Den, good night and act out. And real quick, to keep independent, non-corporatized media like this show going, visit patreon.com/actout.
I can hear the boots are stomping. Come on, boys, let's get some rocks to throw. I can't stand to hear my father cry anymore. Time we left one of you motherfuckers dead in the road. We've been begging up inch by inch, we got nowhere else to go. It's been too many years since your push to serve my shove. I'm not a violent man, but I will kill for what I